Welcome to Move the Stairs, episode 107. We are recording on December 5th, 2025, and we're thrilled you're joining us for today's conversation.
You know, Mitch, today we're going to talk about a survey that we performed that showed that nearly 6 in 10 businesses really feel that they are confident in what they would talk about, how they would communicate during a crisis. But yet, more than 70% of them said they didn't even have a plan. So it was a very interesting conversation we had with these businesses.
It's pretty obvious too. If you don't have a plan, you're going to have a bad time, and all it takes is one mistake to go viral, and that costs you, and not only your reputation, but also your bottom line. And what's interesting here is thinking that because you have reputation, you're going to be okay, and that's not always the case, Mitch.
Absolutely. So today we're going to discuss how to forecast, how to look ahead, prepare, so then you can react quickly. Because if you don't, you won't have the opportunity to turn that crisis situation into an opportunity. That's what we're here for.
And I kind of alluded to this a minute ago. In our survey, one of the things we talked about and asked these business owners was specifically about preparation. And so many of them pointed to the fact that, my customers know me, and if something goes wrong, they're going to have my back. But as we know firsthand in working with clients, that only gets you so far. And in fact, over time, all of that energy that you've spent building up that customer loyalty can evaporate pretty quickly. And that can be through waves of negative reviews, like review bombing, a product recall that you may or may not even be involved in, or just adversarial social media posts that can get out of control fairly quickly. And these business owners did see an immediate impact to their financial bottom line, as well as their reputational bottom line.
Yeah, the reputation that they spent months, if not years, building. So we always talk to our clients about building that customer loyalty. Every business wants to do that. So we have an example, a story that happened. This is a real life situation. Happened in San Diego. There's a rooftop bar there, and it has to do with tipping. So this restaurant is called Senica. It's a very upscale, fancy restaurant downtown San Diego. Well, a diner posted in Reddit's on Reddit that he, after about a tipping situation, he bypassed Senica's preset tipping options. It was like 24%, 26%, 28%. Instead, he manually entered 10%. Now, why? Did he not think it was good enough service? But wait and listen to the rest of the story. So afterwards, apparently he says the server came over and very loud, they said, "Sir, dude, are you serious?" And he brought the cook over and described it as, really a very confrontational situation. Said it's very disrespectful to leave a tip that low. So as you might imagine, this guy that went to the restaurant kind of killed the mood with him and his date. A very awkward situation. So the Reddit post of, as you might imagine, went viral, especially amongst anti-tipping advocates. Quickly triggered this whole review bombing campaign. People who had never even dined there before started leaving 1-star Google reviews, accusing Senica of tip shaming. It just went on and on and on. Well, Seneca is part of a bigger holding group, and they're known in the San Diego area being pretty lavish, highly designed venues, very fancy. Well, neither Seneca or the holding company, the main company, never did a thing. Never posted a statement to the press or made any explanation, no apology, didn't try to reframe the narrative at all. And so from a brand protection perspective, this is really a textbook example of one frontline interaction and like no visible crisis response whatsoever. Really made it a mess for the restaurant.
It really did, Mitch. And it's always important that you build those loyal followers. That's one of the first steps in brand protection PR. But when something like this happens and you see a negative review come out and you don't see any kind of response, it kind of leaves a bad taste in people's mouths. Sometimes your followers will come forward, but that didn't happen. I remember a time I was on a Southwest flight that got delayed, and I tweeted about it. And I remember being so shocked, and this was literally 5-10 years ago. that there was a tweet immediately from Southwest that said, "We understand. We're so sorry that this happened." And there was a little bit of an explainer. The fact that they responded meant so much to me that they cared enough to respond. And, it's not so much in saying we agree or we disagree. It's more in we hear you and we care about the fact that you had an issue. That's really, really important. Jordan, what do you think?
Yeah, I think too, along that same respect, Diane, when you're looking at some of the reviews that were posted in this time frame, there's no way to tell like what's real and what's not real. All the restaurant knew was, oh my gosh, we're getting lambasted with 1-star reviews and they're all saying the same darn thing. So as you're looking at that and looking for a nice place to bring your date, right, you're going to see all these 1-star reviews stacked up, based off of a pretty ugly situation, and probably choose to dine somewhere else. Whereas if you had that, loyal base of customers in place, sometimes we work with some of our clients have specialized groups of, super fans, we'll call them for lack of a better word, that work with them. Without that in place, you really have nobody to kind of come to bat for you. If you're choosing silence over what Southwest did in your particular situation, Diane, you're really kind of just setting yourself up to take it on the chin and get knocked out in the first round rather than draw this out and turn this crisis into an opportunity, which is something that we talk about quite often too.
Yeah, just honoring someone's thought. And for a business owner, I'm sure they think, oh, come on. Somebody's going to complain that the sink in the bathroom wasn't clean or the door was open and it was drafty. And I can't respond to everything. But just by responding, by just saying, hey, we hear you. We understand your concerns. And you don't have to go on and try to explain yourself. You can, but just to acknowledge what they did. Because if you think about that restaurant, they may have had, dozens and dozens of 4- and 5-star reviews. Well, you have to hunt and peck to find those now, right? Because now they have a whole bevy of just 1-star complaints. So that's what you're going to see when you search that restaurant.
It's so true. And you better be able to mobilize someone because those 1-star reviews are now at the top. Yeah. And that's can be so important when somebody's going on to decide whether or not they're coming to your establishment or whether they're going to buy from you. It's what everyone looks at right now. And certainly with ChatGPT and all the AI bots, they're going to pull things from those reviews as well. Mm-hmm. So it's even more important now that you are very attentive to anything like that happens and that you respond in some way or the other, not negatively. It can be a very generic response, but the fact is that you are responding, and that's the important thing.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And sometimes we get this with our clients too. I mean, one of the things that we work on, obviously, is strategy. So we may not be boots on the ground responding to, reviews or emails, but we always follow up with clients just to say, hey, did you see this? Or you want to make sure this is brought to your attention, because they know from working with us, oh, absolutely, we got to follow up with these people, how nonsensical the feedback may be, if it's the dirty sink in the bathroom, to Mitch's point, or if it's something legitimate. The bottom line is you got to follow up, because that stuff will fester and it will rot.
Yep. So Jordan, you were going to talk a little bit about, from a journalist perspective, mm-hmm. We're all former journalists. And so we always think about it from that standpoint. Would you go ahead and do a full court press on this, or would you be very targeted in how you responded as far as going out and getting journalists to do a story on this?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. And it's one of those things where, is this a crisis that then becomes an opportunity? Because review bombing, a lot of times, to Mitch's point earlier, these aren't people who dined there. They're blowing up your business and creating this cloud of negativity over something that may not even be your fault. Now, in the case of the restaurant, they didn't do a great job handling that up front. But I think if you think about this from a broader perspective and you get caught up in something that you had absolutely no part of anyway, which we've seen before and worked with clients before, that's absolutely an opportunity that you can turn into a crisis. You can turn into an opportunity for yourself by saying, listen, media, this is a very real problem. we're caught up in it, and people need to understand the damage that's being done here, despite us having absolutely no part in this. And a lot of times what you see from that, and Mitch, this firsthand, is working in local journalism for as long as you did, the community responds to that kind of stuff. So you could take something horrible and really turn it into something quite good for your business if you know how to approach media and set up that story.
Yeah, because in a sense, you're kind of peeling back the curtain. People are like, it used to be a term people would use in newsroom. It's called good hate. Like it's spicy. That makes a good story. So in this case, you peel back the curtain and go, wait, hold on. Here are the facts in the situation. I think that would benefit someone in this position instead of doing nothing at all. I mean, when you think about it, you watch a newscast and somebody brings up, here's an issue that's a controversy in town. And the mayor says this, and we reached out to this company and we haven't heard back. What does that convey to you? Oh, they must be trying to hide something.
Right.
So it is worthy stepping forward and make it, as Diane put it, it can be very generic, very simple, not drawn out like you're whining, but just say, guys, here's the situation, and just lay out your case and leave it at that, and then walk away.
Also, I think in this situation, I would not paper the story all over. Mm-hmm. I would want the people who saw the story. So in this case, there was one outlet. It was a social media outlet that ran with the story, but no one else picked it up. So we definitely want to reach out to the reporter who ran with the story to make sure that my client's side was told in a really appropriate way. But I also think that on social media, we're going to have to be very, very proactive of not only probably not regurgitating the story, but maybe talk about tipping practices as a whole. Maybe look at a bigger story. Maybe there's an industry story there. Maybe there's a story where the Restaurant Association could have gotten involved, or they could have been asked to get involved in a story of this nature. Because tipping should be whatever you want to tip. We all understand that. This could be a one-off situation, but is there a bigger tipping story there that's going on in that area? And so what is the common tipping that's out there? There's a lot of ways that you could go with this, but I think that I would have more of a surgical strike in this one. Where was the scene? So we have the issue of the reviews. That's one side of it. But then you have the issue of media. Where was the scene? Who covered it? And how do I make sure that I get the other side of the story onto that outlet where it was covered, so that we're not expanding the story more than we wanted to have it expanded to start with?
Yeah. And again, your point's good. It was mostly a social media storm, right?
Right.
The traditional media outlets didn't run with it. It probably to them looked like, oh, he said, she said kind of thing. But still, all those reviews and that Reddit amplification, all the review bombing, that could just erode all the goodwill, all the hard work that restaurant put into its business.
Right. The other thing I would also want to make sure is that whoever was responding had some type of media training, because how you respond can make all the difference in the world. Would you guys agree?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You can't come on there and go, well, body language that's, looks negative and complain or whine. So, you can just say, oh, look, I understand, it was a busy night, whatever. I think how they present themselves is huge, because you watch that, you can read a quote in the newspaper and go, okay, I kind of see where this person's coming from. But when you watch them on TV or online or on social media, and you're like, I don't know, that guy looks ticked off, or he looks like he's making something up on the fly. How you present it is key.
I think this is a perfect example where the restaurant really felt like, from a PR perspective, they were doing just fine. But because there was no response, I wonder if there really is a crisis response set up. And if you don't know who's going to respond to a crisis, how it's going to be elevated. So when that first tweet came in, what was the response to that? Who else knew about it? Who made the decision on what or what was not going to be done? What was the plan? And as we know from our survey, 75% or 70% of the people that we talked to, they didn't have a formal plan. They just felt very comfortable that they would handle it really well. I think this is a perfect example of how something got way out of hand because it didn't seem that there was a plan going on. And that plan and forecasting things that could happen and knowing what the steps are so very important.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's interesting when you look at the data, right? Because this overwhelming confidence that, hey, I've got this, it can evaporate really, really quickly. And one thing that it's hard to kind of measure is what's the stress, what's the anxiety versus, what's the actual monetary losses when something happens like this. Because when you adopt that mentality of, well, I'll just, I'll wing it and, it'll be what it'll be. And if that's radio silence, so be it. But I would argue that the stress, the anxiety, navigating those questions that diners are going to come in and inevitably have for you that may be tied to this situation is totally offset by investing forward, being forward thinking, and putting a plan together and beginning to take those steps to embrace what is, being a truly resilient company.
Yeah, it was pretty clear they didn't. It would seem that they didn't have any plan at all. They're probably thinking, well, PR marketing, that's just for promoting things that we're doing instead of preparing ourselves in case something like this comes up. And when we did our survey, Bozeman said, oh, that happens to somebody else. We're not General Motors. We're not big. I just make widgets and we only have 25 employees. It can happen to anyone,
right?
Big or small. In fact, it sometimes can be worse for the smaller company because they don't have all those people in place. So if you have a plan in place, like who's going to respond, who's going to be the spokesperson, it just makes it go so much easier because the long silence doesn't really help.
Absolutely. And what's clear from this is that there was really no specific tipping loyalty or trust campaign. They had a lot of other marketing campaigns that were going on about, new leadership and refreshed menus and, come in for the views. It's a rooftop bar and you can see the ocean. So that's really where they were going. But brand protection is a whole different ballgame. It's so important that you think, okay, anything could go wrong. We just had a client who happened to be in the wrong area of Colorado when a windstorm went through and they had no electricity for 3 days. And the question was, what was going to happen? The first thing they did was get out with the media and say, this is exactly what's going to happen. That puts them in a leadership role and it helps them. They're being proactive. I had another client in the agricultural sector who had an issue where in the industry, something happened with a food recall and everyone in that industry was impacted and the sales plummeted. The client got out in front of it and said, this is what we've done to make sure that our food is as safe as possible. Those are all stories that really interest the media. So you have an opportunity if you think through a process of what would I do if something happened, and you can have certain scenarios of this happens, but the point is that you've thought through the steps of who's going to take the lead, are they media trained, and then how are we going to really take a leadership position? Everything else then, no matter what the problem is, seems to fall in place. And you can really that's how you turn that crisis or that challenge into a great opportunity to get some very good PR and build your client loyalty. And you come full circle then, and it can make such a huge difference in what you do. And that's brand protection PR.
Yeah, just being prepared, right? This was a nice place, and so I'm sure they have a decent following. It's beautiful. It's got the view. It's got the food. Confidence is great, but that alone's not gonna. You're like, well, I'll just wing it when we get around to it. Having a plan and being prepared is the key.
Yeah, I mean, in this case, all it takes, and you make it sound overly simple, because it can be. The work that you put into it is where the rubber really meets the road. But all it takes is coming up with 5 scenarios, developing a plan around those 5 scenarios, and you probably have a good, your bases covered. And as things happen, you may be going into a plan and just making like slight modifications. But, you know, in the case of the tipping, it's where was your messaging around tipping? You know, if you think about restaurant and I think about foodborne illness, you know, what type of content or supporting content do you have, Diane, to your point about that agricultural client that says, here's how we do things to make sure that everything coming out of our kitchen is good, it's healthy, and, you know, here are cleaning practices, so on and so forth. Those are two I just thought of off the top of my head. Imagine you work with a company like us and you can really sit down for a full day and flesh out a full plan so that you're covering all of those scenarios and you have the messaging, you have the planning in place, and suddenly you're sleeping a lot better at night.
You know,
Absolutely.
a little side bubble I thought of, you know, when we work with clients and we say, all right, we're going to go through in case there's the crisis that, oh, no, we're fine. And we have them do it and they get real uncomfortable at first because they don't really want to think about that. Here's a neat little side benefit of it. We notice every time that their leadership team bonds. Why? Because the guy in sales goes, oh, I didn't know that you guys in security thought about that. And then he says, oh, I didn't know that those of you in IT worried about that. Oh, I didn't know that was a sore point for you, the vice president. I didn't know that was and they all learn from each other about what they're concerned about, what they're worried about. And they all get focused on the main picture. That's making their business the best it can be. So it really brings them together because you know how businesses can get kind of siloed. Everybody who's worried about what their job is, and they don't really consider how it impacts others. So it's a nice little side benefit for meeting, sitting down, going through what may happen, and coming up with a plan.
And imagine one day, maybe 2 half days, and all of a sudden you're set for easily the next year.
Yeah.
And you're already thinking ahead so that when things are happening culturally, if things are happening geographically, it's like, oh, we know, okay, we have done the blocking and the tackling that we can make the most of this. And we can put people at ease so that they know that we've already thought through it. We've got it. You can trust us. And trust, man, that's priceless. That's priceless whether you are a service business or you're selling something. It doesn't matter. Trust is your reputation, and your reputation is the most important thing in your business. And for brand resilience, it is the bottom line. So that's what we want to make sure that people understand. It's so important to be able to do this. So we hope we've given you some ideas of things that you can think about, especially as you're coming into the new year, how you can really put this brand protection, surround your entire business with it. It's like a moat around your business. And as Mitch says, it helps you sleep better at night too.
Yes.
So thank you.